Tonight, we don't speak of castles or knights, but of the smell of manure, of fleas, and of the hunger of medieval Europe. You are about to live a real day in the year 1325, a place where even waking up is a battle for survival. So no glamour, no glittering candlelit festivals, only rotten straw, church bells, and mice scurrying across your bed. If Hollywood has taught you that the Middle Ages were an era of courage and romance, then I'm sorry. The truth is much harsher. This is a story of daily life, where the evil, the filth, the pain were not occasional occurrences, but the daily rhythm for every person. Before we begin, I want you to prepare. Let your room grow a little darker. If you can, turn on a fan or the soft sound of falling rain, to mimic the vague background noise of ancient villages. Pull the blanket up to your chest, touch your mattress, a clean mattress, fragrant with freshly laundered fabric. Hold that feeling in your heart, because in just a few moments, you will have to imagine yourself lying on a pile of old damp straw, reeking of a cowshed. Take a deep breath. Everything you hear next is just imagination, but let your mind follow. Because as soon as your eyes close, you will see it. A small, cramped space, light filtering through a thatched roof, the sound of bells echoing from afar, and you have just woken up on a medieval morning. Don't worry, this journey is safe. You don't really have to smell, to touch, or to shiver from the cold, like the peasants of that year. You just need to let go, listen to every detail, to understand how harsh their day was, and to see how lucky you are. If you like this way of storytelling, this whispered journey that takes you through sewers, past watery porridge, through a flea-bitten era, then please like and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly want to be a long-term companion. And in the comments, let me know. Where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? It's always fascinating to see thousands of people from all over the world listening to the same story about the inconveniences of the year 1325. So then, let us begin. You are still alive, but so are the fleas. And your bed is not a bed, but a pile of rotting straw. You open your eyes, not to the gentle light from pristine white curtains, nor to the sound of a smartphone playing your favorite tune. Instead, what pulls you from your dream is the resounding clang of a church bell, distant yet piercing, as if someone were striking metal directly against your skull. It doesn't ask if you're ready, it simply announces, it is time to wake up, whether you want to or not. This is the medieval version of an alarm clock, louder, more persistent, and certainly less humane. You try to roll over, but your body protests. The mattress you're lying on isn't really a mattress. It's a sack of straw that has changed hands at least 3 times. Each brittle, rotten stalk, steeped in the damp mustiness of the old winter, is further scented with sweat, dirt, and something you suspect is chicken droppings. Every time you move, the straw rustles like the wings of insects, and, that's right, there are actual insects, fleas, dozens of them. They treat your body as a midnight buffet, itchy, tingling, but there's no choice but to endure. The blanket on top of you? Don't imagine clean white cotton. This is a dirty, gray wool blanket, unwashed since the previous winter. It has absorbed enough kitchen smoke, sweat, and ash to weigh nearly as much as a small calf. You pull it aside and immediately regret it. The cold morning air rushes in, seeping through every crack down in the wooden roof, making your lungs contract. This house is actually just a single-room wooden hut. No windows, no partitions. Everything, people, livestock, belongings, is crammed into one space. You can clearly hear the shifting of goats, the clucking of chickens, and the scampering of mice across a dark corner. This medley of sounds merges with the pungent smells. Old ale, sweat, animal fur, and something you pray is mold and not a rat's corpse. This is the official scent of the morning. You try to stretch your back, but your spine cracks like a rusty hinge. Both your knees ache. You are only 22 years old, but in 1325, that is already middle age. A deep-seated fatigue clings to you, as if your body has lived twice its actual years. You swing your legs off the straw mattress. The first sensation, cold and wet. The floor is muddy from last night's rain, leaking through the thatched roof. If it's not rainwater, it's something else. Perhaps a souvenir left by the neighbor's chicken when it wandered into your house. You dare not think further, only knowing that your bare feet are now part of this ecosystem. And you are not alone. Beside you, the whole family is still stirring. Parents, siblings, even some distant relatives staying over. All sleeping in one room, under the same thatched roof, on the same damp earthen floor. No curtains, no concept of privacy. When one person turns, the whole group is awakened. When someone coughs, straw dust flies up, sticking in your nose. You sneeze, and immediately, 2 fleas jump onto your leg, as if delighted that their breakfast has been served. This is a typical morning in medieval Europe. You are never truly alone, because there are always people, livestock, rodents, and parasites for company. And the harshest truth? This is only the beginning of the day. You take a short breath, trying to ignore the damp, pungent smell. Then gather all your courage to stand. Your body shivers from the cold. You stagger as if playing a game of chance. Will your feet escape the dirty puddle, or will you slip and fall in the mixture of mud and manure? In the Middle Ages, just a fall at the start of the day could lead to infection, and no one had antibiotics to save you. Yet you must get up, because the bell still rings, because the family is starting to move, and because here, sleeping in does not exist. Congratulations, you have successfully woken up in the year 1325. And the bad news, from now on, things can only get worse. You've just managed to stand up from the straw mattress, your bones creaking, your feet still cold and muddy, when your body immediately reminds you of another need, one that no one can escape. That's right, nature calls. And it doesn't call with a gentle voice. It screams. In the modern world, you could stumble into a sparkling clean bathroom, close the door, turn on the light, sit down on a clean porcelain toilet, press a button to flush, and forget all about it. But here in 1325, a restroom is a luxury more precious than gold. You are about to experience an adventure that is public, humiliating, and dangerous. If you are a peasant, your restroom is most likely a rickety wooden bucket placed behind the house. The bucket is already full from last night, because your Uncle Wolfstan ate some bad turnips and spent the night contributing. The smell rising from it is not just unpleasant. It is so potent you believe the Bible must have a separate chapter on this very stench. You try to hold your breath, do what needs to be done, and then comes the climax, emptying it. Empty it where? Into the street. That's right. You carry the bucket, go to the window or the front door, Shout a French-derived word as loud as you can. Gardez-vous, meaning watch out below, and then toss the entire contents onto the cobblestone street. And of course, no one ever gets out of the way in time. Thus, the morning is graced with another unexpected brown shower for any unfortunate soul passing by. The streets of a medieval town are not normal pathways. They are open sewers, foul, muddy streams, flowing between rows of houses where human waste, animal manure, garbage, and rainwater sing in chorus. You step out of your house, your bare feet touching the road, and you understand immediately. Here, every step is a gamble with your health. If you are luckier and live near a public latrine, you're not necessarily better off. You will have to sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers in a narrow, dark wooden shack, open at both the top and bottom. Imagine you're trying to concentrate, and the farmer next to you says hello while telling you about his crops. And you can't reply because even breathing is too difficult. There is no toilet paper, no air freshener, just a shared atmosphere of stark reality. And if you're a nobleman, you think it would be better? Congratulations! You have a garderobe, a recess in the castle wall lined with wood, with a deep pit or even a direct drop into the moat below. The idea sounds civilized. Waste falls into the water and is carried away. But this is the Middle Ages. The water in the castle moat is rarely clean, and your enemies know this. Records tell of attacking armies climbing up the waste chutes to infiltrate castles, which means yes, someone has broken in by crawling through the very place you just sat. A secret passage no one wants to brag about. Personal hygiene, forget it. No paper, no towels. Common folk used straw, leaves, old rags, or their hands. Some luxuries like wool scraps or pieces of leather were only for those who could afford them. And because of this, washing hands was almost unheard of. The handshake was never a custom, not because etiquette hadn't been invented, but because it was too risky. Worst of all, accidents were always lurking. The stone roads were slippery with rain, mud, and other things you don't want to name. One slip, and you'd find yourself in close contact with a communal product of the entire community. There's no faucet to wash it off, no antibacterial soap. If you're lucky, you just stink all day. If you're unlucky, a small scratch can turn into a slow death from infection. That is the unavoidable reality. Personal hygiene in the Middle Ages was not a private matter. It was a public ritual, a part of life in which the whole village participated, whether they wanted to or not. Every morning, the entire town shared a common smell, a common river, and a common kind of shame. You leave your hygienic experience with mixed feelings of wanting to laugh and cry. The wooden bucket, the street, or the garderobe in the castle wall. None of the options are pleasant. But you must move on, because the morning is long and your stomach is beginning to rumble. Congratulations! You have passed the second challenge of the medieval day, the toilet. And believe me, the breakfast awaiting you is no better. You've just escaped the inglorious hygienic adventure when your stomach begins to protest. A gurgling sound echoes like a small drum in the wooden hut. Not the drum of war, but a reminder, it's time for breakfast. And breakfast in the year 1325 is not the elegant ritual you imagine, but one of the most tragically comical experiences of the day. In the modern era, you can choose from countless things: crispy toast, a golden fried egg, fragrant butter and milk, a steaming cup of hot coffee. But forget all of that. Here, breakfast is summed up in a single word: pottage. Pottage is not a dish. It is a cumulative project. It begins in a black iron pot hanging over the hearth fire from days before. Day after day, anyone in the house with something to add simply throws it into the pot. A leftover turnip, in it goes. Wilted greens from last week, in they go. A few beans, a handful of oats, or if you are incredibly lucky, a piece of fat the size of 2 fingers also goes in. There is no recipe, no measurements. There is only one rule: never empty the pot. You squat by the fire, looking into the iron pot. Inside, a thick liquid bubbles, giving off a smell that is earthy, smoky, and musty like damp ash. Occasionally, a strange film rises to the surface, shimmering like oil but not at all fragrant. It could be fat, or it could be a mystery. You don't ask, because the more you know, the harder it is to swallow. You are given a wooden bowl. Yes, no shiny metal spoon. Just a crude spoon made of wood, its edge already cracked. You ladle out some pottage. It is heavy, thick, and when it falls into the bowl, it makes a sound like mud plopping into a puddle. You blow on it gently, then bring it to your mouth. The first sensation is heat. It's hot, but unevenly so. One spot burns your tongue, another is stone cold, because the pot hasn't been stirred well. The taste? An indefinable combination. A little sour, a little bland, with a hint of bitterness. A piece of some vegetable gets stuck between your teeth, and in the next bite, you crunch on a small piece of grit, probably from the millstone. Eating pottage is not like eating food. It's like playing the lottery. Every spoonful is a surprise. Alongside the pottage, the only side dish is black bread. But to call it bread is a bit of a compliment. It's more like a brick. Made from barley or rye flour, often mixed with anything to stretch the dough. Ground bark, wild beans, even fine sand. You pick up the loaf so hard you believe it could be used as a weapon in a brawl. When you try to bite it, your teeth clack, and you think to yourself, if dentists existed, they would get rich from this bread alone. To wash down the food, you need a drink. But here, water is the enemy. Drinking unboiled water from the river or well is an invitation to bacteria and worms. So everyone, including children, starts their day with small ale, a low-alcohol beer, but at least it was boiled during brewing. You lift the wooden cup, take a sip. It's slightly sour, slightly bitter, not at all refreshing like modern advertisements, but compared to ditch water, it's a savior. Spices, forget it. Pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg. Those things are more expensive than gold. A peasant might live their whole life without ever smelling them. The spice you usually get is onion, and there are always onions, cheap and pungent, making the already smelly room even more so. This breakfast doesn't make you happy, nor does it keep you full for long. It just happens. You eat to have the strength to hold a hoe, carry water, or do whatever hard labor is waiting outside. You chew each bite, feeling a mix of amusement and nausea, and try to swallow quickly so you don't have to think too much. And you suddenly realize, here, food is not for enjoyment. Food is the medicine for survival. Every spoonful of pottage swallowed, every piece of bread gnawed, is a reminder that you are still alive, at least until the end of today. You put your bowl down, take a long breath. The smell of smoke deeply embedded in your lungs. Your stomach is temporarily quiet, but your mind is not. Outside, work awaits, and you know well, breakfast in the Middle Ages was never a gentle start. It was only a warning that the hard day's labor had arrived. You've finished your bowl of thick pottage and gnawed on a piece of bread as hard as a brick. Your stomach may no longer be rumbling, but your whole body still shivers from the morning chill. And so you look around for clothes. Actually, the word look is an overstatement because you have nothing to choose from. In the Middle Ages, a wardrobe did not exist. There were no neat drawers, no colorful hangers lined up. Instead, you have only one set of clothes, the one you wore yesterday, last week, last month, and possibly all of last year. You live, work, sleep, sweat, and sometimes even die in the same outfit. The shirt in your hands is a coarse wool tunic, a dull grayish-brown, splotched with grease stains, mud stains, and dried pottage from days ago. The fabric is rough, itchy, as if someone wove weeds and dirt into every thread. You pull it over your head and immediately feel your skin protest. Every movement is a friction, a battle between soft flesh and rough wool fibers. Is there underwear? Rarely. Some lucky people had a thin linen undergarment, but not you. You wear wool directly against your skin, and it feels like being wrapped in a straw sack. Patches of damp fabric from yesterday haven't fully dried, so when they stick to your skin, they are cold and clammy, carrying the musty smell of old sweat. Footwear? If you are a peasant, you most likely go barefoot. Summer and winter alike, you step directly on muddy ground, animal manure, and sharp stones. If you're lucky enough to have shoes, they are usually made of raw, unprocessed leather, crudely stitched, nothing more than a leather bag tied around your foot. They don't offer much protection, rain soaks through, mud seeps in, and after just a few weeks, the smell inside your shoes could make the entire hut suffer. You bend down, tying a piece of cloth around your lower legs. The cloth is frayed, its threads sticking out. When you tighten it, you feel the blood struggling to circulate. But if you loosen it, the cloth slips. You accept the gradual numbness in your ankle. Because here, everything is a trade-off. And now for the free accessories, a mobile colony of parasites. Lice, fleas, bedbugs, no one escapes. They live in every seam, every fold, clinging to the wool, weaving through your hair, into your armpits. You give a light scratch and a whole tiny world responds. No one is surprised if you stand in the middle of the market, scratching while talking. In this era, itching is a universal language. You take a wooden spoon, yes, the same wooden spoon used for porridge, and use it to scratch the back of your neck. The scratching sound is faint, flakes of skin fall. A louse runs by, you pop it between your thumbnails, and hardly anyone bothers to notice. It's a habit as normal as sneezing. The smell of your clothes? A mixture, smoke from the hearth, old sweat, mud, and sometimes a whiff of spilled goat's milk. You wear them all day, all week, then go to sleep in the very same outfit. Washing, not easy. To wash, you have to draw water from the well, start a fire, boil it, then soak the clothes in ash or crude soap made from animal fat. It's a day-long project, and most people choose the not washing saves effort approach. Tears in the fabric? You patch them with any scrap you can find. A shirt patched with sackcloth, pants patched with old leather. Each outfit looks more like a patchwork quilt than clothing, but no one cares. Because here, the only fashion is survival, and then you step outside. The itchy wool rubs against your skin. The wind blows through the tears. Your feet are either freezing cold or caked in mud. The parasites move beneath the fabric, and you know that today they will feast on your body once again. In the modern world, you can stand before a mirror, choosing a shirt, a dress, sneakers. But in 1325, mirrors barely exist, and clothes are just a second skin. A hard, itchy, dirty skin, full of accompanying creatures. You don't dress to look good. You dress to not freeze to death, and sometimes to hide the bites and sores that no one wants to see. You pull up your collar, take a breath, and know that you will have to endure this feeling all day long. And you realize a simple truth. Wearing clothes in the Middle Ages isn't about protecting the body, it's about challenging it. You've put on the coarse wool clothes as itchy as a second skin. You step outside, feeling the cold wind cut into your face. And then, as you prepare to greet a neighbor, you think of something, a smile. In the modern world, a smile can be magical. It makes you look friendlier, more approachable. But in medieval Europe, smiling was a dangerous decision. Not because people hated joy, but because your teeth, and those of most people around you, were not a sight anyone wanted to see. In the year 1325, there were no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no dental floss, no mouthwash. The concept of oral care had not really formed. People occasionally chewed on small twigs to clean their teeth, or rinsed their mouths with wine or vinegar. But that was a rare luxury. Most of the time, teeth were simply left alone. The result? If you were lucky enough to survive childhood, by the time you were 20 or 25, your smile already resembled a crooked fence. Teeth worn down from eating bread mixed with sand and grit. Cavities as black as tiny caves, swollen red gums, and breath strong enough to command the attention of an entire room. Toothache, don't even ask. It was the faithful companion of every medieval person. There was no paracetamol, no antibiotics. A toothache simply existed, throbbing, making it hard to sleep, hard to eat, and sometimes so unbearable that all you could do was pray. And when a tooth went bad, you didn't go to a dentist because that profession didn't exist yet. You went to the barber. That's right, the barber was the specialist in tooth extraction. He had a razor, crude iron pliers, and a dimly lit room with a candle. You sat down with no anesthetic, no painkillers, and hoped the process would be quick. If it was quick, you were lucky. If it was slow, you could only scream, while others watched and nodded. Well, that's medicine. And if a cavity led to an infection, no one knew the words infection or bacteria. People called it bad air or God's punishment. Sometimes just one bad tooth could lead to a high fever, exhaustion, and a quiet end on a straw bed. You didn't need a sword to fall. A single tooth was enough. Morning breath? Everyone had it. The smell of ale, of small beer, of onions, of yesterday's pottage, all mingled together. When you spoke, no one was shocked because everyone was the same. So dating in the Middle Ages wasn't based on a smile. It was based on land, livestock, and sometimes tolerance. And there's another ironic truth. The nobility, the wealthy, often had worse teeth than the peasants. Why? Because they could afford sugar, a commodity as rare and expensive as gold. And it was that sugar that made their teeth decay faster, turn blacker, and their smiles look like a living warning. A noblewoman might show off a table laden with sweets, but when she smiled, her teeth told a different story. You walk past a dim bronze mirror, a rare luxury. You catch a glimpse of yourself, a hesitant smile, and you understand why medieval people rarely laughed out loud, rarely showed their teeth. It wasn't because they were melancholic, it was because they knew a smile could make you look more frightening. So you close your lips and keep quiet. In this place, solemnity was considered wisdom, and silence could hide half the truth, that every one of your teeth was a ticking time bomb. You close your lips, hiding the teeth that few would want to see. Taking a breath, you step out of the damp wooden hut. It's still early, the ground is soaked with dew and last night's rain, but the village is already stirring. The church bell echoes, the rooster's crow mixes with the cry of a child, and it all seems to say in unison, it's time to work. In this world, labor is not a choice. It is the only condition for survival. If you don't work, you starve. If you starve, you die. Simple, brutal, no exceptions. You look around, men, women, children, all are heading to the fields. There's no concept of childhood. A 5-year-old child already knows how to hold a small rake, pull weeds, or shoot chickens. A 10-year-old girl has to learn how to grind grain, cook pottage, and mend clothes. And you, at 22, are considered almost middle-aged, and your duty is to work from sunrise until it disappears behind the trees. Your tools? A chipped wooden hoe, a rusty sickle, or if you're lucky, a scrawny plow ox. You put your shoulder to the yoke. If the earth is soft, mud splatters. If it's hard, your hands blister. No gloves, no sunscreen, no tractors. Only muscle, breath, and a dwindling supply of patience. You bend over the long rows of newly plowed earth, sowing barley seeds. Each seed that falls is like a prayer that the next season won't bring too much rain, nor too long a drought. A prayer that mice won't eat everything, and that pests won't spread. But you know well, one failed harvest means the whole village starves, and no one has a backup plan. Field labor doesn't stop at planting. When you're not in the fields, you still have to work. After plowing, the men fix the roof, mend the fence, or when war comes, take up a sword to fight for their lord. After fetching water and grinding grain, the women also have to care for children, tend goats, spin wool, and mend clothes. They work twice as hard, but it is considered natural. You look at your hands, cracked, calloused, nails caked with dirt and animal manure. These hands hold the spoon at breakfast, the hoe in the field, and tonight will hold firewood to start the fire. There is no soap to wash with, no ointment to soften the skin. The cracks between your fingers will swell, and all you can do is wrap them in an old cloth. But tomorrow you will have to use these same hands to continue. In this society, there are no weekends. Sunday is the only day of rest, but rest only means you must go to church, pray, and confess. If the harvest is urgent, even Sunday becomes a workday. No one asks, "Are you okay? How is your mental state?" The word stress has not been invented because everyone is equally stressed. The sounds of the workday blend together. The thud of the hoe hitting the earth, the bellow of an ox, the wind whipping across the field, the hacking cough of a child in the dust. Sometimes there are arguments, curses, then silence again, because everyone knows words don't make bread. Only sweat can be traded for food, and there is never a shortage of sweat. It soaks the wool on your body, making the already itchy clothes stick even tighter. A cold wind blows by, making you shiver. At noon, the sun is high. The wool becomes a furnace. Sweat pours down, flies swarm, but you cannot stop. Every second of rest is one less spoonful of pottage for tomorrow. At times you look up at the vast, sprawling field. You see a truth. Your life is confined to a few hectares of the Lord's land. You work for Him, pay taxes to Him, live on His land. And in return, you have the right to continue working so as not to starve to death. A strong wind blows past, carrying the smell of damp earth, animal manure, and the sweat of the people hunched over beside you. You breathe in, breathe out, and realize this is not just the smell of labor. This is the smell of survival. You are hunched over in the field, your calloused hands gripping the wooden hoe handle. Sweat soaks your coarse wool tunic, running in streams down your neck, before disappearing into the damp fabric. But don't think sweat is just sweat. It's a reminder that your greatest enemy is not the Lord, not bandits, but the sky. In medieval Europe, the weather was not gentle. It was an invisible tormentor that never let go. Winter and summer, neither was on your side. Winter, the thief of warmth. When winter arrived, the whole village turned into a cold stone cellar. There was no central heating, no glass windows to block the wind. The wooden hut where you slept had walls made of woven branches and clay, full of cracks, where the wind blew freely like an uninvited guest. You huddled under a heavy, musty-smelling wool blanket, shivering as your breath turned to white smoke in front of your face. The fire in the hearth? Yes, but it was weak. Firewood was a precious resource, so much so that you couldn't keep a large flame going all night. The forest belonged to the Lord, and gathering wood in the wrong place could be considered theft. A small branch could be exchanged for punishment. So you learned to live with the cold. Every morning you woke up with numb feet, fingers as stiff as stone, and a vague fear that today might be the day you couldn't get up at all. In the fields, the ground froze as hard as iron. The hoe would strike it and bounce back, sending vibrations up to your shoulder. You breathed in, your lungs filling with frigid air, the smell of earth mixed with rotten straw. The cold didn't just make you shiver, it seeped into your bones, making every joint crackle like a rotten wooden door. You worked, but your body whispered, winter does not want you to survive. Summer, the furnace with no escape. Then, when the sun returned, you thought things would get easier. But you were wrong. Summer in the Middle Ages was a furnace. No fans, no shade other than the distant forest, no light, airy clothes. You still wore the same itchy wool outfit, now transformed into a portable sauna. In the fields, the sun beat down like a hammer, reflecting off the cracked earth. You held your hoe, your back drenched, salty sweat running down to your lips. You wanted to take off your shirt, but you couldn't. Exposing your skin to the sun meant burns, insect bites, and whispers about your indecency. Flies, mosquitoes, ticks, a whole summer army considered you a feast. They buzzed by your ears, bit your neck, and stung your ankles. You swatted, scratched, and then continued to work, face down. The buzzing of bees and the whining of mosquitoes became the soundtrack of the season. And sometimes, when the air was still, the smell of livestock manure would rise, hot and heavy, mixing with your sweat to create a kind of summer fragrance that no one would want to bottle. Inside the hut, it was no better. The wooden structure became an oven. Smoke stained the walls, the thick thatched roof trapped the heat, and there were no vents. You lay down, sweat sticking to the blanket, listening to the cries of children, the arguments of adults, and realized summer sleep was as harsh as a winter death. Spring and autumn, the hidden traps. You thought at least 2 seasons would be gentler, but spring and autumn were just as unforgiving. In spring, the rain fell ceaselessly, turning the village paths into a quagmire. You hiked up your tunic, wading through mud, each step heavy and clinging, then brought that smell into the house. Your shoes, if you had any, disintegrated in a few weeks. In autumn, the wind turned cold early. Fallen leaves covered the ground, hiding potholes and stones. You stumbled, you fell, you tore your clothes, and every small fall was a risk, a scrape, an infection, then sickness. The weather as a judge. In this society, the weather was the supreme judge. Whether a harvest was good or bad, whether a family lived or died, it all depended on rain, sun, wind, and storm. No one could control it. No one dared to defy it. People could only pray, make the sign of the cross, and hope that the heavens would be merciful. You stood in the middle of the field, watching dark clouds gather, the wind whipping dust into your eyes. Your whole body was exhausted, but you knew this was just an ordinary day. Because in the Middle Ages, each season didn't just change the landscape. It was a unique trial of survival, a different form of punishment. You've just looked up from the cracked field, the summer wind whipping your face, sweat mixing with dirt, when a thought flashes through your mind. If only I had a sip of cool water. In the modern world, water is a given. Turn a tap, and a clear, cool, clean stream flows out. But in medieval Europe, water was not your friend. It was a patient, invisible enemy, and it often won. The seemingly clear river. You walk down to the bank of the stream near the village. The water trickles by, crystal clear under the sun, looking so inviting. But you know not to be fooled by its appearance. A few hundred yards upstream, someone probably just dumped a bucket of waste. A little further, a dead animal is bloating. Clear water does not mean clean water. It only means you haven't seen anything floating on the surface yet. Peasants needed water to cook, to irrigate, to wash, to live. But every sip was a game of chance. Sometimes you were just thirsty, so you drank, and then continued to work. Other times, just one gulp was enough to make your stomach cramp for days. No one called it bacterial infection. That concept didn't exist yet. People just said, God must be testing us. Ale instead of water. That's why medieval people drank small ale instead of water. The beer, brewed from barley and boiled in the process, at least killed some of the invisible things in the water. Children, women, men, everyone started their day with a sip of flat, weak ale, more for survival than for pleasure. You see a 6-year-old child lifting a wooden cup to drink it, and no one finds it strange. Here, ale is a savior. It doesn't get you drunk, but at least it doesn't kill you immediately. If you were wealthier, you had wine. But that was a rare privilege of the nobility and clergy. For you, crystal clear water was a distant dream. Murky ale was life itself. Bathing, a dangerous luxury. You think, at least I can use water to bathe. But in the Middle Ages, bathing was not a habit, but a dangerous ritual. The medical belief at the time was that bathing too often would open the pores, allowing disease to enter. Therefore, keeping oneself sealed in a layer of dirt was considered protective, a natural coat of armor. People feared bathing more than they feared mud. Occasionally, there were public bathhouses. Initially, they were truly places for washing. But soon, laughter, whispers, and extracurricular activities turned them into centers of gossip and vice. The church did not like this. As a result, many bathhouses were closed, so the opportunity to be clean became even more remote. At home, to take a bath, you had to boil a large pot of water and pour it into a wooden tub. But the wooden tub leaked, the water cooled quickly, and if the whole family used it, you could only pray you weren't the last one. That water had become something no one wanted to step into again. So most people chose the simple solution, not to bathe. Rainwater, a double-edged gift. When it rained, you tilted your head back, opening your mouth to catch the drops. Cool, refreshing. But when collected in a barrel, rainwater quickly became a reservoir for decaying leaves, insect corpses, and a thin green film on the surface. A free cocktail with the bonus of a lingering fever. Yet the village still depended on rain. No rain, the crops died. Too much rain, floods washed everything away. Too little rain, the wells ran dry. Every drop of rain was a roll of the dice from the heavens, and you could only pray as you watched the dark clouds gather. Water, life disguised as death. When you drank, bathed, washed, irrigated, water was always there. But every time you touched it, it whispered a sentence. You need me, but I don't need you. One wrong sip, a wound washed with dirty water, a rainstorm that rots the crops. And your life could take a different turn, faster than you could realize. In the modern era, you wash your hands with clean water and soap, and then forget about it. But in the Middle Ages, a scoop of water could be the bridge between life and death. People didn't call it an enemy, but deep down, everyone knew water in its raw form was not on your side. You bend over the well, looking at the still water reflecting your own face, gaunt with dark circles under your eyes, dry lips. For a moment, you feel you're not just looking at your reflection in the well, but into the deep abyss of your own fragility. Then you lift the bucket, take a small sip, and pray that today it will spare you. You've just taken a sip of well water, your heart still fluttering with uncertainty about whether you'll wake up tomorrow or be stuck on your straw bed with a cramping stomach. And if the worst happens, if your body starts to shiver, if you're hot and cold, or if a rash spreads, then you know what to do. Seek out a physician. In the modern world, you have doctors, hospitals, antibiotics, scanners, an entire system to protect life. But in medieval Europe, medicine followed a different path. A path filled with superstition, ancient theories, and experiments on your own body. The four humors, a strange formula for survival. The entirety of medieval medicine revolved around a single theory, the four humors. It was believed that the body contained four liquids that determined health: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. When these four were in balance, you were healthy. When one was too much or too little, you were sick. It was that simple. A headache, too much blood. Lethargic, excess phlegm. Sad, overwhelmed by black bile. Angry, yellow bile taking over. Everything came down to an imaginary bowl in your stomach where the four liquids were constantly arguing. And the cure? Bring them back into balance. It sounds logical, but the way they did it will make you shudder. Bloodletting, the all-purpose remedy. You have a high fever? The physician says you have too much blood. The solution, let some of it out. A dull blade, an earthenware bowl, and a physician, or sometimes just the barber surgeon. They would make a small incision, let the blood flow out, and then nod sagely. The hot air has been released. Sometimes blood was drawn using leeches. The leeches were placed on the skin, slowly sucking, growing plump, then falling off. The patient would feel faint, but the physician would smile. Balance is about to be restored. Purging and vomiting. It wasn't just blood. The other humors also needed adjusting. If you had no appetite and felt bloated, they'd say, you need to get rid of the excess phlegm. The only way? Take a laxative, ground herbs, bitter tree sap, or some strange concoction would be poured into your mouth. Then you'd clutch your stomach and wait for your body to react. Medieval people believed that each purge was an expulsion of demons from the body. Other times it was the opposite. You had to vomit. The physician would mix a potent solution, you'd drink it, and soon you'd be kneeling over a wooden basin. They'd say, good, the black bile is out. Surgery, no anesthesia, no antiseptic. If you unfortunately broke a bone or got injured, the only method was direct intervention. There was no anesthetic, no rubbing alcohol. A knife heated in a fire wasn't to kill germs, but to look more imposing. Wounds were stitched with coarse thread and a large needle. If you were lucky, the bone healed. If not, a fever would set in, and no one understood why. Sickness and judgment. There was no concept of bacteria or viruses. People believed that sickness came from bad air or was a punishment from God. You have a cough? It's from the bad air from the swamps. You have a rash? It's for some unconfessed sin. People treated illness with herbs, charms, prayers, sometimes by placing a holy relic on their chest. If you recovered, it was a miracle. If not, it was also God's will. Faith as medicine. In the midst of illness, you might see a physician reading from a holy book, or a priest standing by your bed. They would anoint you with oil, lay on hands, and offer words of comfort. Endure, and your soul will find peace hereafter. Medicine and religion were intertwined, making every drop of medicine, every incision, carry a sacred weight. And in that world, you understood. Sickness was not something to be cured. It was a trial, a lesson, a broken balance that one could only accept, endure, and hope. You lie there, after a bloodletting session, your head spinning, your lips parched. The physician looks at you and nods. The body will balance itself. And as he leaves, you are struck by a cold realization. In the Middle Ages, the cure was sometimes as dangerous as the disease itself. You've just escaped the physician's hands, your arm still marked by the rough bandage, your head spinning from blood loss, your stomach empty, and your throat parched. You drag yourself back to the hut with only one simple wish in mind: dinner. But in the Middle Ages, dinner was not a reward. It was a game of chance. No refrigerator, no trust. Food was not stored in sealed containers. There were no refrigerators, no ice. Everything depended on salt, smoke, the cold winter wind, and a little bit of hope. Meat hung outside for a few days, blackened by smoke, dry on the outside, strangely soft on the inside. Fish caught from the river yesterday already had a strange smell, but it still had to be cooked because throwing it away meant starvation. Bread, yes, but as hard as a rock. Sometimes, to make the dough last longer, people would mix in ground bark, wild seeds, even fine clay. Chewing a piece, you felt like your teeth were grinding against rough stone. Pottage, the immortal stew. The most familiar dinner was still pottage, a thick stew cooked with whatever was left over. In the morning, you threw in a few turnips. At noon, you added some beans. In the afternoon, if there was a stale piece of bread, you tossed it in. And tonight, the pottage is still bubbling on the hearth, with its musty smell, smoke seeping throughout the hut. This was not a new dish. It was a continuous river of cooking, flowing through days, weeks. What you ate today was the leftover from yesterday, and tomorrow you would eat the leftovers of today. You scoop up a ladleful, the steam hitting your face, you blow on it, and then swallow. Not tasty, but better than nothing. Salt, the treasure on the table. A grain of salt was as valuable as a small coin. Salt not only made food less bland, but it also extended the life of meat and fish, so the salt cellar was guarded like a treasure. When the head of the household sprinkled a few grains of salt into the pottage, the whole family watched as if witnessing a miracle. In contrast, luxurious spices like pepper, cinnamon, and nutmeg were only found on the tables of kings. A pinch of pepper could be worth a peasant's entire month's wages. For you, the only flavor besides salt was the taste of smoke and earth, meat, a distant dream. If you were lucky, you had a small piece of meat. But even meat wasn't safe. Hung for too long, the meat changed color. Cooked thoroughly, it still had a strange smell. But you closed your eyes and ate, because in this world, hunger was more dangerous than any kind of meat. Villagers sometimes risked setting rabbit traps in the woods. But if they were caught, that was the crime of poaching on the Lord's land. The punishment could be a fine, imprisonment, or even worse. So the piece of meat in your bowl tonight was not just fatty, it also carried the taste of fear. Ergot, the enemy in the loaf. Sometimes bread made from rye or barley was contaminated with ergot fungus. People didn't know what microorganisms were. They only knew that if they ate that bread, their heads would spin, their muscles would convulse, they'd see hallucinations, and their mouths would babble nonsense. Some villages called it God's curse. But in reality, it was just a meal containing toxins that no one could see. You bite into the hard bread, hoping that today it isn't a dangerous loaf. In the dim candlelight, no one could be sure. Eating, a ritual of risk. The family gathers around the small fire, passing a wooden bowl. No stainless steel spoons, no ceramic plates. Just crude bowls and bare hands. You slurp a spoonful of thick pottage, take another bite of bread, and drink a sip of weak ale. Every bite is a gamble. Will it help you live another day, or will it make you come down with a fever tonight? But you still eat, because not eating is certain death. Food, both savior and betrayer. In this world, dinner was not a comfort, but a ritual of survival. It reminded you that food not only nourishes, but can also betray. Every spoonful of pottage, every piece of bread, every sip of ale was a tightrope walk between starvation and sickness. You look around, seeing the whole family eating in silence. The dim candlelight illuminates their gaunt faces. No one says anything because they all know. Just having something to eat is a miracle. You've just finished dinner, a bowl of thick pottage, a piece of hard bread, and a few sips of weak ale instead of water. The entire hut is bathed in the faint yellow light of a candle. You think you're about to rest, but before you can lie down, the church bell rings from afar. The sound is heavy, long, and pierces the night. For a medieval person, the bell is not just background music. It is the clock, the calendar, the reminder. Your soul does not belong to you. It belongs to the church, the village under the shadow of the cross. At the center of every village is a stone church. Whether small or dilapidated, it is still the most solid structure. The high vaulted ceilings, the dark interior, the smell of burning wax candles and incense mixed with the dampness of the stone. People believed this place was the only gateway for the soul to heaven. Every day, you hear the bell call at least 3 times, morning, noon, and night. No one dares to miss it. Missing one prayer could turn into a rumor that that person is not devout. And in a small community, rumors are more powerful than truth. The exclusive language. You kneel, your eyes on the altar. The priest reads the scriptures in Latin. You don't understand. Most of the villagers don't understand. But no one dares to question it. In this world, the church not only preaches, it is the keeper of knowledge. You only hear the deep, sonorous tones, the steady rhythm of prayer, like a lullaby. And in that lack of understanding, you are reminded, knowledge is not for you. It is the privilege of the clergy, of the learned. You just need to believe. Sin is everywhere. After a meal, did you eat pork? If it was a Friday, then sorry, that's a sin. Did you dream of your neighbor? That's a sin. Did you oversleep and miss morning mass? A sin. The list of sins is endless, leaving you constantly feeling guilty. And it is that feeling that keeps you in check. You don't just fear sickness or starvation, you fear hell. Hell, a tangible fear. In his sermon, the priest paints a picture of hell. Blazing fires, rivers of blood, endless screams. The children cry out in terror, the adults bow their heads in fear. No one has seen it with their own eyes, but everyone believes, because not believing is more dangerous. You look at the flickering candlelight in the church, the strong smell of hot wax. In your mind, hell appears more clearly than any field or stream outside. The tithe, an offering of soul and life. Every year, the church collects 1/10 of your crops, livestock, or whatever you own. This is called the tithe. Are you poor? It doesn't matter. The poor must also pay. If you don't pay, you are not just indebted to the village. You are indebted to God. The peasants watch their grain stores dwindle, but dare not complain. They tell themselves, this is the way to keep their souls from being burned. In the priest's stone house, the grain is piled high, but outside, children are still gnawing on turnip peels. Control through faith. The church does not need an army to rule. It only needs faith. It only needs to plant a fear in every heart. That you can die not only from hunger, from sickness, from cold, but you can also die again in eternity. And so you continue to kneel, to listen, to pay taxes. The bell rings, you stand. The bell stops, you sit. Every movement of your life revolves around that bell. Night falls under an invisible eye. After the evening service, you return to your hut, the oil lamp flickering. But even with your eyes closed, you can still hear the faint ringing of the bell in your ears, a reminder that you are never truly free. Even in your dreams, you are under the supervision of an invisible power. You clutch your hungry stomach, your back aching, and drift off to sleep with a mixture of faith and fear. Faith that tomorrow, if you wake up, you will live another day exactly the same. And fear that if you don't, you will have to answer for all your sins, even the ones you didn't know you committed. You've just left the church, the sound of the bell still echoing in your ears, your heart full of fear and reverence. But as you step out from the shadow of the cross, you realize something else. In the Middle Ages, faith controlled the soul, while violence controlled the body. Law, public performance. In the village, rumors spread faster than the wind. A chicken thief is caught. The next day, all the villagers are summoned to the square. There, on a wooden platform, justice unfolds like a play. The chicken thief is tied up, the villagers whisper. Children sit on their father's shoulders to get a better view. Punishment is not just to deter the guilty. It is a performance. The more people who witness it, the stronger the power of the Lord and the church. No one dares to think of rebellion because they have seen the consequences with their own eyes. Trial by water and fire. If someone was accused of a more serious crime, heresy, witchcraft, treason, then the court would let God decide. The accused had to dip their hand in boiling water to retrieve a stone, or walk a few steps holding a red-hot iron. If the wound healed quickly, it meant they were innocent. If not, you know the rest. Another trial, being thrown into a river. If you sank, you were innocent, but you might have already drowned. If you floated, you were guilty. This was not justice, but a roll of the dice with fate. Daily violence. Even without a trial, violence was the spice of life. A wrong look could get you beaten up in the middle of the market. A dispute over land boundaries could turn bloody. In the home, a husband had the right to discipline his wife and children. On the road, the Lord's soldiers could rob anyone without a reason. Violence was not the exception, it was the common language. People were not shocked because they were used to it. A child grew up with the sounds of screams, fists, and the clash of swords. It was the soundtrack of the era. War, the ever-looming storm. In the distance, rumors of war were always lurking. One lord provokes another, or a crusade calls young men to leave the village and go far away. The peasants understood that any day soldiers could appear, the harvest could be stolen, their houses could be burned, and they could be dragged onto the battlefield with a wooden spear and a few dry rations. War was not a rare major event. It was like a seasonal storm. You never knew when it would come, but you were sure it would. Short life expectancy. And through it all, death was always closer than you thought. Modern people might think a lifespan of 70 or 80 is normal, but in the Middle Ages, 30, 40 years old was already old. Not because people were weaker, but because the world was too harsh. Children, nearly half died before the age of 5. A fever, a famine, or dirty well water was all it took. Women, many died in childbirth. It was a lottery of life and death with every pregnancy. Men died from work accidents, from fights, from war, or simply because a small wound became infected. Anyone who lived past 40 was called old. That person became a rare witness, like an ancient tree that had survived many storms. Death, a familiar spectator. The shallow graves around the church grew more numerous. People were buried quickly, with a short prayer, and then life went on. Death was not shocking. It was like a frequent guest who knocked on the village door without warning. You sit by the fire, listening to the wind howl through the cracks in the door, and you know that tomorrow your name might be called at the service. No one knows. Only one thing is certain. In the Middle Ages, death was not a question of if, but only a question of when. You lie back on the straw, the candle has burned out, the distant church bell still echoes. And in the darkness you understand. Life in this time is just a fragile thread, stretched taut between faith, violence, and uncertainty. A day has passed, and you have survived, but how many more days are there? No one knows. You have walked with me through a long day in medieval Europe. From a damp, musty straw bed, a watery and bland breakfast, to the sound of the church bell, the back-breaking work in the fields, and then the bone-chilling winds and the melting heat of summer. We have passed through public punishments, trials by water and fire, the smell of wax candles in the church, and finally, the ever-present shadow of death. At first glance, it is a strange, harsh world, almost unimaginable for us today. But when you listen closely, you will see, in every detail of mud, sweat, and tears, there is still the shadow of humanity itself. They laughed, they sang, they loved, they hoped. The people of the Middle Ages had no electricity, no clean water, no doctors like we do. They lived short, vulnerable lives, but they also had faith, family, folk songs, moments of laughter by the fire. They lived day by day, not because the world gave them many reasons to, but because the human instinct is always to cling to life. And that is the miracle, because when we look back, we realize the progress of humanity did not come from any magic. It came from the efforts of the generations that went before, those who endured the cold, endured the plagues, endured injustice, to gradually build the world where we sit today, a world with clean water, medicine, electric light, and a comfortable bed. There one day, a reminder for us. Just imagine, if you lived for just one day in that world, could you bear it? Probably not. But our ancestors lived their whole lives like that. And they continued, they left descendants, they wrote music, embroidered cloth, built houses, sowed seeds, and believed in tomorrow. So every time you let out a sigh of relief in a warm room, wash your face with clean water, or sip a cup of tea, remember that it is a privilege paid for by hundreds, thousands of years of suffering and trials. The lullaby of history. History is not just about kings, castles, or battles. It also whispers about the anonymous people, the diligent peasant, the gaunt mother, the child playing in the mud, the old man sitting by the embers. They left no names, but they left behind a legacy of resilience. Tonight, when you lie in your clean bed, breathing in the fresh air, you can smile, because you know you are not just living for yourself. You are living for all those who never had the chance to dream of a day like this. So if there is one thing to take away from this journey, it is this: do not take for granted what you have. Be grateful for a comfortable bed, for clean water, for a day free from exhausting labor. Because each of these small things in the eyes of a medieval person was paradise. Let history lull you to sleep, not with fear, but with a deep sense of relief. You were born in the right time, and although the world today is still full of problems, at least you don't have to start your morning on a damp, musty straw bed. End your evening with a nameless bowl of pottage, and then wait for the church bell to decide your fate. You are living in an era that your ancestors could only dream of. And that, perhaps, is the greatest gift that history has given to you, to me, to all of us.